We're now joined here on Super Bowl Radio Row by Mina Kimes. Mina, enjoying your week here in Los Angeles, in Anaheim, I guess?
I am. I just learned what Who Day means, or the origin of Who Day, from you. It was a little underwhelming as far as the story goes, but I have been hearing Who Day a lot at Disneyland where I'm taping. Every now and then a gaggle of Bengals fans will walk by and just randomly scream Who Day.
Just break out and chant.
Yeah, it actually is pretty catchy, so.
I think that's why it's stuck to, well, it's no longer, I guess it's We Day now is what the Bengals are saying. That's something that
Who Day? We Day? Like that?
Yeah, although it's Who Day gonna beat them Bengals, so.
Who Day gonna, all right.
Anyway, we talked in the preseason about the Bengals offensive line. If we talk again this offseason, we'll probably again be talking about the Bengals offensive line, and we'll probably talk about the Bengals offensive line in this game as they'll have their hands full. But as you've been preparing for the game and doing your own coverage, is that the biggest key to the game, do you think, or do you think it's something else? Where are you focused?
I think on that side of the ball, yeah, we've spent a lot of time talking about, on NFL Live, on my podcast, the Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny, how the Bengals will possibly game plan around the biggest mismatch in the game, which I'm sure you've talked about a lot, which is their offensive line versus the Rams' pass rush. They've taken different approaches to that, wildly different approaches, honestly, even over the last 4 to 5 weeks, which makes it a little bit hard to predict, candidly, and I certainly have my opinions about what I think might work or what could work, but I feel like that's the number one question going into this game from Cincinnati's perspective, because we talked a lot about like the Rams, how you're going to cover Jamar Chase, that sort of thing. From the Bengals' perspective, I think that's it.
If you're Zach Taylor, you have options, right? You can slide every snap to Aaron Donald, and you probably do slide to Aaron Donald a lot. You can go quick game again, which they've done a lot of. You can go screen game, which, you know, you go back to the Vikings game against the Rams. They had some success there. There have been teams that have had success against the Rams in the screen game. If you're Zach Taylor, what's your adaptation this week?
I would go pretty heavy on the quick game and the screen game. You know, you mentioned the Vikings, but actually quite a few teams have had success versus the Rams in that regard, because if this Rams defense has a weakness, it is at linebacker at that second level, especially in coverage. And that's actually a big part of the reason why I think you've seen them struggle during the regular season, at least against teams like the 49ers. That and sort of the physicality in the front. But yeah, I could see Cincinnati, since you have so many quick skill players other than Jamar Chase, finding good mismatches. Well, obviously it'll depend on how the Rams defend Jamar Chase, which is kind of the big mystery. But yeah, that's what I would do. And, you know, I was a little bit frustrated with how much Coach Taylor reverted to the early down runs in the last game. I would like to see some of those runs, which were largely pretty inefficient. Granted, they do serve some purpose in terms of keeping Joe Burrow alive, but I would like to see some of that replaced with a quick passing game.
I said something similar in our game preview. Like, you can't just not run the ball on first down, or you're doing your passing offense a disservice. But, you know, more runs and passes on first down, like it felt like, or maybe was against the Chiefs. I can't actually remember exactly. It feels like you're throwing away too many downs.
Was so odd, because they played the Chiefs literally, was it 3 weeks before then, and took a different approach. Again, this is coming after Joe Burrow getting put on the ground 9 times, so obviously that impacted his play calling, but it's the Super Bowl. This is it. I want to see him surrender running over and over.
And you mentioned, you know, what's going to be different and how unpredictable this game is, what approach is going to be taken by the Rams defense. I have similar questions about Lou Anarumo's defense and, you know, how the Bengals will then choose to attack. Are they going to do a Jamar Chase heavy approach, or, to your point, I think you tweeted last night and I replied to you about the T. Higgins slant idea, and they've been running him on a lot of, you know, shallow in-breakers, and occasionally they'll use a dragon concept where they'll send the flat underneath and they'll send him on the slant. But I know they use T. Higgins in the short game a lot. I think it's a weapon, and he has such a size mismatch with Darius Williams, if that's what the mismatch is on the outside.
Forget Darius Williams. There's not a single Rams defensive back or linebacker, anyone other than Jalen Ramsey, who's a good matchup with T. Higgins, who's freaking enormous and has hands made out of Velcro. So, you know, this is why we won't know until the game begins, or even a few drives in, if Jalen Ramsey is going to shadow Jamar Chase. If he does, that makes life a lot easier for the rest of the Rams, of course, because then you can actually give someone help covering T. Higgins or whatever. But if not, which is entirely possible as well, or situationally, you got to think T will probably eat and get a significant amount of targets against this Rams defense because, like you said, outside of Jalen Ramsey, they're not that great.
And just like Cooper Kupp is going to find mismatches, especially on the weak side when they go empty, Tyler Boyd might find some matchups against those linebackers you talked about. It's funny you mentioned the whole Jalen Ramsey thing, and it'll be interesting to see if the Bengals test Jalen Ramsey if they do get him on an island with Jamar Chase, and the Rams aren't afraid to put him on an island, obviously. Donovan Martindale took the same approach with Marlon Humphrey, who sat in that chair and has put up on his social media how he's tired of being asked about Jamar Chase. Obviously different players, but a really fun matchup. On the other side, I know you've been pretty complimentary of Lou Anarumo's defense and how they've been able to change things up, and that's one of my big questions. People have asked me, what's the approach going to be for Lou's defense, and
well,
I don't know, right?
all I know is they're not going to blitz a lot. I think we can safely say that against Matt Stafford. But, you know, one thing I love for the Bengals about the Chiefs game is, if nothing else, he gave Sean McVay a lot to think about. Like, I don't know how much of that drop bait they're going to use in the cover one robber, but Sean McVay knows now it's a possibility. Like, before that game, if the AFC Championship hadn't happened, I probably would say, they're probably going to play too high. Honestly, like, that's the approach that tends to work decently well against the Rams. You want to encourage them to run the ball. The Rams, some people seem to not be aware of this, are not a great running team at the moment, and I love those Bengals defensive tackles. I think they can hold up. But, yeah, as you mentioned, Lou's been so schematically diverse that it's really hard to predict what he's going to do, which I think is a pretty, I would say, an advantage for the Bengals, but that unpredictability really helps.
It's just such an interesting story to me because of where Lou's come from to now where he is, where he's cooked up these game plans, especially like in the last few weeks, especially under the microscope in the playoffs, to be that creative when it really counts. I would like to see a little bit of that on the offensive side of the ball. There's been discussion from Bengals fans like, let's get the RPO game going again, and you know, can you do that in 2 weeks and get that far away from what they've been doing all year? If you're Lou Anarumo and you've found ways to take away Tyreek Hill, take away Travis Kelce when they're dropping the defensive end into the Travis Kelce window and they're bracketing Tyreek, is there something there that, because I don't think you can really drop being under-gapped the way the Bengals were against the Chiefs. Like, they just left gaps alone. And you have these multiple threats.
Well, Sean McVay will run if you do that. If Lou Anarumo does exactly what he did in the second half, he won't. But the Rams would attack it the way. And Sean McVay, you know, is young, modern, whatever. That dude loves to run the football. He's actually pretty conservative. So I do think, you know, if they dare them to run, they will run. And like I said, I think you'd rather live with them running than hitting Cooper Kupp or Odell Beckham Jr. as much as possible.
Have you given a prediction for this game?
Yeah, I think I try to give one and stick with it, and I think a couple weeks ago I went Rams 31, Bengals 28, which I think is a cover now, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe it is.
Everyone's actually surprised by that because I have it so high scoring. And maybe it is a little too high scoring.
Maybe 6 points.
We'll see. We'll see.
I like the 3-point margin of victory for one team. It's hard to say which team. I'm not in the business of predictions, but I know many are. I was curious to.
I'm wrong a lot, so Lockdown Bengals listeners, it's probably a good thing that I picked the Rams.
I feel like a lot of people say that too.
But it's a good thing. Here's what I'll say. If Matthew Stafford turns the ball over multiple times, I think the Bengals will win. If he doesn't, I think the Bengals lose. It's kind of as simple as that for me.
And that's the X factor, right? He's been better with ball security in the playoffs than he was late in the regular season. And which version of Matt Stafford shows up?
I mean, he tried to turn it over. But so did Joe.
Joe did too. But Joe, to his defense, and I'll just come to his defense briefly here, has been pretty good about being safe until that Chiefs game.
He's also being, you know, murdered, unlike Matthew Stafford, so.
Real quick, I know we've hit all the bases.
Sure.
Trey Hendrickson, I know you really like him.
My beloved.
And we talk a lot about the Rams defensive line in this game, but do you think, we know that the Rams offensive line is pretty good. Can the Bengals get pressure with 4?
I think they can. One thing I'll be interested in seeing is how they use Trey Hendrickson. So, as I mentioned, you and I seem to agree that they're not going to blitz. The Rams' offensive line is kind of interesting. All the advanced metrics love them in terms of pass block win rate. I don't as much as the metrics do. I think there's been times where they look elite. I think in the postseason they've looked really good. But there's also been games where I've seen, especially the interior of the offensive line, get bullied. So if I were Lou Anarumo, I would try to get Trey Hendrickson inside on stunts, move him around, play games as much as possible, because there are mismatches to be had, and he's been so great.
I love the Bengals' interior defensive line in this game. Think they will miss Larry Ogunjobi. Would love to see more twists and stunts games. They didn't do much of that against the Chiefs, and we'll see if that comes out this week. Maybe that's the wrinkle.
Maybe.
I think everybody knows you, Mina Kimes. She's got a great podcast. We've had her on the show before. Thanks so much for your time.
Houday.